Welcome, everybody. Good day, all. Welcome to the Institute for Critical Study of Society Sunday morning program, also called ICSS Sunday. It used to be at Nibel Proctor Marx's library, but now, since COVID-19, we're doing remotely. My name is Raj Sahai, who, along with June Rule and 6 other members of the program committee, organize our programs. The Institute for Critical Study of Society at Nibel Proctor Marx's library was formed in 2004 to preserve Marx's heritage as well as to support emerging struggles for racial and gender equality and for socialism. And so the opinions, however, expressed in our lectures, workshops, and publications are only those of the authors and do not represent any group consensus on the issues discussed in this forum. We are united, however, in our respect for the work of Karl Marx, who in his 11th thesis on Feuerbach said philosophers have explained the world in different ways. The point, however, is to change it. Since the talk today is cooperative economics, I thought it would be appropriate for me to quote Lenin from his essay on the subject of cooperation, which he wrote in January of 1923. Here's what he wrote. I quote, "Indeed, the power of the state over all large-scale means of production, political power in the hands of the proletariat, the alliance of this proletariat with the many millions of small and very small peasants, the assured proletarian leadership of the peasantry, etc., is this not all that is necessary to build a complete socialist society out of cooperatives alone, which we formerly ridiculed as huckstering, and which from a certain aspect we have the right to treat as such now under NEP?" This is the period of NEP. That's my new economic policy. "Is this not all that is necessary to build a complete socialist society?" Lenin asks. It is. Still not the building of socialist society, but it is all that is necessary and sufficient for it. So Lenin placed a lot, end of quote. So this is and in conclusion, Lenin said, "A number of economic, financial, and banking privileges must be granted to the cooperatives. This is the way our socialist state must promote the new principle on which the population must be organized. But this is only the general outline of the task. It does not define and depict in detail the entire content of the practical work. That is, we must find what form of quote-unquote bonus to give for joining the cooperatives and the terms on which we should give it. The form of bonus by which we shall assist the cooperative sufficiently, the form of bonus that will produce the civilized cooperator, and given social ownership of the means of production, given the class victory of the proletariat over the bourgeoisie, the system of civilized cooperators is the system of socialism." So that much emphasis he placed on socialism, on cooperatives. So this topic our speaker, Sharat has picked has this background with Lenin speaking almost 100 years ago. So let me give you the introduction to our speaker, who is well known to many present today in this gathering. In his summary, Sharat said, "Cooperative economics are alternative to both capitalism and its inequality and existing models of state socialism and central planning. Experience with worker-owned cooperatives around the world has shown that worker participation in decision-making can work. Hierarchy is substantially reduced but not eliminated. Worker satisfaction is qualitatively enhanced, and labor productivity and innovation can be competitive with capitalist enterprises. But can worker-owned cooperatives be scaled up to achieve economies of scale? That's the question he asked. What are the different models of cooperatives? What can we learn from the cooperative bubbles like Tahrir Square, Occupy, Gezi Park, Rojava, Burning Man, or sharing economies? How do we understand the relations of production in worker-owned cooperatives and their relations of exchange? Can we imagine a global economic system dominated by cooperative economics? Asked Sharat. So Sharat Lin, whom I have the privilege to have known for 45 years, completed his PhD at UC Berkeley back in the 70s. He is presently a research fellow with the Human Agenda and the Initiative for Equality. He writes and lectures on global political economy, labor migration, social movements, and public health. He has studied producer-owned cooperatives in Spain, Cuba, Venezuela, India, and the US. He has observed firsthand many temporary experiments in self-organization, as well as state enterprises in both capitalist, socialist, and hybrid states. So with that, I present to you our guest speaker today, Sharat Lin.
Well, thank you very much, Raj, and thank you very much to the ICSS for having me again. And yes, so today I'm going to speak on cooperative economics, and I got onto this topic actually because some other groups actually requested that I speak on it. So I said, okay. I mean, I looked at some of the experience, some of the studies that I've done, and said, yeah, I probably cannot give really a comprehensive view of everything that's going on in the world on this topic, but I can give you some things from from what I've studied and from what I have seen firsthand, and so that's what I will do. Now, when we talk about cooperation, I started from the concept of cooperation and observing that there are what I call these social bubbles that have come up in our world and our history, where we see remarkable degrees of human cooperation. I mean, we're talking about people who have never met each other before, who work together, who share labor, they share resources, they clean up after themselves and look after the land or the place that they are occupying. And I thought, well, these are sort of societies in a way that we often wish that our larger society, the cities, the countryside, the countries that we live in, we wish that the larger societies could work in this sort of way, which is more cooperative, less competitive, less cutthroat, and then so I asked myself, okay, so what enables some of these cooperative bubbles, and Raj had mentioned some of them, such as in the Arab Spring in Tahrir Square, Gezi Park in Turkey, Occupy in the US, although we also saw that there was also a lot of conflict within Occupy, and there are reasons for that. And then I just visited. I had the opportunity to go to Burning Man this year. I was always curious about it, and it was a very interesting experience. I didn't go to this year and last year the Burning Man which takes place in the Nevada desert north of Reno, and the official one was canceled last year and this year because of COVID, but there was an unofficial gathering. So we're talking about a a temporary city of almost 10,000 people. Now that's not a small number. It's small compared to 2019, where there are estimated to be 80,000 people gathered on the desert and setting up this literally a temporary city. Now, to organize such a city, it requires a certain conceptualization of how to set that up, just how to lay it out. And the benefit that Burning Man had in its unofficial years was that the people who go there, the people who are the enthusiasts who go there year after year, have a memory of how it was organized when there was a Burning Man organization to assign spaces and keep things organized according to certain rules. And of course, there were for years and years there have been a certain set of principles, the 10 principles of Burning Man, such as leave no trace. The most important, of course, is radical self-reliance. So the idea of you bring everything in you need to survive, and you take everything out, including all of your waste. And so it's not something that just happens spontaneously. It has a history. But what I observed, and maybe I can start by sharing my screen here. So I wanted to start with some of these concepts, and what I'm talking about so far is these cooperative bubbles. But one of the things that in a cooperative bubble that is notably missing, well, there are two things. One is that the people who gather in these bubbles are, at least the ones that tend to work well, are a select group. It is not a cross-section of entire societies. It's people. I mean, to get to Burning Man, it takes a considerable effort. It's a long distance away. It's in a remote location, and the people who go there have bought into the 10 principles. They adhere to those principles, and they practice those principles. They know how to do it. So when people share certain values, that really is a key factor in having a cooperative bubble, so to speak. I'm not, notice that I'm not using the word economy, because economy it is not. Okay, because to have an economy, you have to have production, you have to have exchange, and so production and exchange are marginal at best in most of these cooperative bubbles. Now there are other, and we'll get into we'll see as we go into this, how this is important, to how this is an important difference between the cooperative bubbles and a cooperative economy, and why the cooperative economy, this is key. And particularly when, as a Marxist, we look at the relations of production and the relations of exchange as being key definers of the nature of a society, and whether or not there's exploitation, whether that generates inequality or not. Now, there are other concepts that have been floated, words that have been used, sometimes with more or less thought. But one concept that a lot of activists in circles that I frequent use, the concept of a sharing economy. If we, in other words, if we have something in excess, we can share it or give it to the community. And if everyone in the community, or even if most of the people in that community do the same thing, then if we have a need, we can also take from what others are sharing or giving. And now, of course, a sharing economy or a gift economy, it's questionable, whether or not this kind of economy can allocate resources to where they're needed, whether it creates the incentive or the organization to produce more of what is really needed. And then there's the question of scale. Can this be scaled up into an entire society? There's the concept of a barter economy or a cashless economy where there is trading, and there's an attempt to value what is traded as a basis for trading commodities. It becomes a little bit complicated to do that without cash. It's not clear what taking cash out of the equation really achieves in terms of equity. Then there are concepts like the peace economy, which is just simply taking the coercion, the use of force, the militarization out of the economy. It doesn't say anything really about the mode of production or the mode of exchange. And then we come to, of course, what many of us have been advocating for a long time, which is socialism. And of course, different people may also have different concepts of what socialism means, other than that it is non-exploitative. It aims to create a transition towards a classless society by eliminating the exploitative relations of production. What we know is that the countries that have declared themselves to be socialist, that have political parties that have declared their intent to create social societies, that these countries have, for the most part, outside of agriculture, for the most part, they have created societies that are based upon state-owned enterprises and a centrally planned economy. And they have not, by and large, created or even enabled they have not provided the legal framework for the creation of worker-owned cooperatives. And so one exception to that, of course, is the case of Yugoslavia, when it was under a socialist government, which had the concept of workers' self-management. And so the enterprises were controlled. The decision-making was in large measure controlled by these member workers forming a council and making decisions for the enterprise. And then finally, what we're going to focus on more here about the cooperative economy. Now, in terms of the sharing society, just a few glimpses because these are things that are actually happening. We have this concept at the San Jose Peace and Justice Center of a sharing box, where it's now called the Peace Pantry, where some foods or other essentials are placed there by either the Peace Center itself or by others who come along, and they bought some things they want to give to the community, and then members of the community who are in need take from this peace pantry. And the beauty of it is that here it is in the middle of a downtown area, and you think, okay, well, there's something that's free, somebody will come along and just take everything. It has never happened. It has never happened. And so there is, I think, some uh, um, you know, there is some sort of code of ethics that the community has accepted, and so this sharing box or peace pantry, seems to work. This is a scene from Tahrir Square back in 2011 during the Arab Spring, where people were cooperating. I mean, the thing about Tahrir Square was that after the attack on the square on February the 2nd by the government supporters, the protesters cordoned off the square. They put barriers around the entire square and controlled access to who comes in. And of course, it's not a foolproof check, but it created a safe space where some things that were very unusual, like the fact that no woman was molested in Tahrir during that period of time, when it was effectively a physical bubble. People cleaned up, after events and in a very cooperative way. And so this was a remarkable thing. But again, there was no economy. So everything that was eaten, everything that was done in the square was brought in from the outside. So there was no production. And this, of course, is from Burning Man. This year we had the smoke from the wildfires up in around Lake Tahoe that created a very different atmosphere at Burning Man. But you see, these are some of the encampments that were also, they're private, but some of them are also welcoming the public to come in and socialize or take part in whatever sometimes services they might be offering. And but the only production that's really happening here is maybe the assembly of these art cars. The art car itself, the creation of the art car is done in somebody's hometown, and then disassembled, transported to the Black Rock Desert, and then reassembled again into these curious vehicles. And maybe the only thing that could be said to be exchange of goods and services was a few places like this, and there were very few where there's this is actually an art car, by the way. It moves, but it's like a street vendor, selling sandwiches and drinks. But I don't know whether they were actually charging money or they were just gifting. But in any case, the buying and selling is almost non-existent. There were people giving things away, but it's not really, even in an exchange sense, an economy. And once again, because of this concept of radical self-reliance, the whatever wealth exists in BlackRock is basically brought in from the outside. It is not created or exchanged at BlackRock. Okay, so what we want to do is instead focus on production and secondarily exchange, because that's a real economy. So when we look at cooperatives, which are economic units of either production or exchange, and this includes, when we say cooperatives, unless we specify worker-owned cooperatives, it refers to all types of cooperatives where there's a certain class of members who have statutory ownership of the enterprise. or the economic unit. And if we count the number of such cooperatives, we see that there are very, very few of them in the historically socialist countries, right? So China, Russia, Vietnam. I mean, they have essentially no cooperatives. Now, some countries like China and Cuba have some cooperatives in the agricultural sector. So these are the residuals of the communes in China and the cooperative farms. I mean, the cooperative farms in Cuba, many of them were created, long after the revolution, and over time, Cuba has enacted laws that enable the creation of more different types of cooperatives. Now, again, these include producer co-ops as well as worker cooperatives, and we'll get into what the differences are. So the country, these circles show the number of cooperatives in various countries, and you can see that it turns out that the largest concentrations of functional cooperatives are in Europe, and the United States has a big circle only because it's a big country. We have a big population, but in terms of the number of cooperatives per unit population, it is smaller than most of the European countries. It's smaller than Canada. It's smaller than Australia. And you see, I throw this up, workers' rights index by country, and you might debate whether or not the validity of some of these estimates. But you see, there is some correlation between where cooperatives exist and the rights of workers, but it's a rough comparison. Anyway, let's turn to the types of cooperatives. So the main types of cooperatives are consumer cooperatives, and actually these form the vast majority of in terms of the number of cooperatives and the number of members in the capitalist world. Most of these cooperatives are consumer cooperatives. So for example, if I join a credit union or I join the co-op supermarket chain, I'm a member. I have a vote. Maybe I have a share of statutory ownership in that cooperative, but I don't work there, and the workers who work in these cooperatives are not necessarily members. A producer cooperative is, for example, where farmers get together and they say that, okay, we each have a share in the ownership of this cooperative. The function of the cooperative is to buy the inputs collectively for all the individual farmers. So the individual farmers still own their own land, right? So they are cooperative in terms of buying and maybe selling the produce. So the cooperative sells the produce for them, and so each farmer doesn't have to go into the market and sell their own produce or to buy their own fertilizer. The cooperative can do that and achieve some economy of scale and efficiency. And then, most importantly, what I really want to focus on are the worker-owned cooperatives, where the members are the workers in that enterprise, and every worker is a member. And then there are multi-stakeholder cooperatives, and what this means, and I will show some examples of it, is that the members, there are actually two kinds of members. So one member would be the worker members, right? And then the other members would be either the consumer members or producer members. So it's a sort of it's two types of cooperatives, brought together into one cooperative enterprise. Both of the types of members have votes in the governing council, and the last one is a federation. So for example, the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, which is a resource and a membership association for individual cooperatives in the United States, has as its members the cooperatives. So it's a cooperative of cooperatives, essentially. Okay, now I chose to get a little bit of data from Canada because it was readily available, and sort of gives us a sort of a nice snapshot of cooperatives in Canada, and also because per capita there are more cooperatives in Canada than there are in the United States. And you can see that the distribution of cooperatives in Canada is not uniform, even if you relate that to the population of the various provinces. And so you can see that for example, Quebec has more cooperatives than Ontario, despite the fact that Ontario has twice the population of Quebec. So part of this is culture, and maybe the French Canadian culture has some history, has some legacy of cooperative economics that makes cooperatives more popular in Quebec. Some of them are this however, this category of cooperatives includes some enterprises that are very large. I mean, we usually think of cooperatives as being that practically speaking, it's easy to have cooperative governance of a small enterprise like a bakery or a restaurant, and difficult for something that is very large, like Co-op Oil, the Co-op Oil Company in Regina, Saskatchewan. But there are such large enterprises that are legally cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives. Now, how democratic they are is another question, maybe separate from that. Just looking at Canada, the number of cooperatives by type, you see that the vast majority are consumer cooperatives, and the second largest category is the producer cooperatives. Again, mostly farmers. The worker-owned cooperatives, which are the 42 and the 257, add them together, are so that's about 300, and of course these are old figures back from 2013, but about 300 plus worker-owned cooperatives in the whole of Canada, and in the United States it isn't that much higher than that. So it's a very, very tiny slice of the cooperative economy, and an even a much tinier slice of the total economy of a capitalist country, unfortunately. In terms of the economic sector that cooperatives are prevalent, we see that the largest one in Canada is real estate and rental and leasing, which of course includes housing. So these are housing, for the most part, these are housing cooperatives. If we look at retail trade, there are 700 some in retail trade, and in food services like restaurants, it's tiny, only something like 60 such enterprises. So once again, the cooperative economy is there, but it's very, very marginal in the total economy. In terms of size, there are actually, in terms of percentage of how they're distributed, there actually are fewer co-ops make a smaller percentage of the total number of co-ops in very, very small enterprises of less than 10 workers. And that's simply because there are lots of private enterprises that are just family owned, one person or two person, three person individual enterprises. Whereas co-ops, usually you have to have at least 2, 3, and usually more people that make it worthwhile to go through the process of creating a legal worker-owned cooperative. But there are still some that if you, of course, this chart is biased because the cutoff is 250 members, and of course, if you were to carry that out into the thousands, you would see that the number of co-ops would fall off much more rapidly than private firms. In the United States, again, as I said, I couldn't find a good map of the distribution of worker-owned cooperatives in the United States, and but they're concentrated mostly in the urban areas, and here in the Bay Area we actually have a significant concentration because and this is, I believe it's current, and so there's a network of Bay Area worker cooperatives, and there are something like 91 worker-owned cooperatives in the Bay Area, and the largest concentration of them are in the Oakland, Berkeley area, secondarily in San Francisco, and just a handful in San Jose. And I must say that of the ones that are in San Jose, one of my organization's Human Agenda has been the incubator for a number of the cooperatives in the South Bay. There is increasing interest in cooperatives in general, and worker-owned cooperatives in particular. And this is an assembly, California State Assembly, a hearing on cooperatives, which was initiated by Assemblyman Ash Kalra, a very notable progressive assemblyman from San Jose. And so it's important when progressives, elected officials, stand up and say that we want, and it's very important to have legislative support, because there is a critical need for the state and the financial institutions, to provide the environment and the infrastructure that is conducive and supportive for the creation of worker-owned cooperatives and other types of cooperatives in general. As part of the work of Human Agenda, one of the things that we have done is to inform ourselves about how some of the local worker-owned cooperatives are operating, and hear the stories of the worker members of these cooperatives. So one of them is the Arizmendi Cooperative. It's a bakery and a pizzeria in Oakland, and the stories that are told are that there were considerable challenges. I mean, it's really not a simple or easy task to create a worker-owned cooperative in a country that promotes capitalist enterprise, where the financial institutions, the banks, even some of the sorry to say that even some of the credit unions do not recognize the importance of worker-owned cooperatives, and they only have a framework that enables them to provide banking services to private enterprises, and so unfortunately they don't. Not all of them. Some of them do. Some of them are good, but not all of them provide financial services for worker-owned cooperatives. Another one in Sunnyvale is the Slice of New York Pizza, and we've heard a lot of stories about them and how it took them a long time to engage in to have a cooperative culture. So it's not just a matter of setting up the legal framework, but all the member workers of the cooperative have to figure out how they're going to buy into the cooperative membership, and how they're going to make decisions, and how they're going to consciously struggle against hierarchy and all the things that are required to make a functioning cooperative successful. There's a sign on the Slice of New York that reads like this. I thought it's some interesting things about their philosophy. A work co-op is a business that is owned and democratically governed by the people who work in it. Worker co-ops create long-term, stable jobs, have sustainable business practices, and are connected and accountable to their community. Now, this last concept, that they are connected and accountable to the community, there's nothing in a cooperative organization that necessarily makes this so, but it happens because the worker members are individually members of the community, and the cooperative ethic, right, is to operate for the benefit of the workers and for their community. It's not for some owners who are hundreds of miles away, some shareholders who are scattered around the world, a boss who's in another location. These people are connected to the local community, and that makes a difference. In Cuba, we have visited a number of worker-owned cooperatives. In fact, Human Agenda has been, there weren't any during the pandemic, but has been offering emulation tours to people who want to go and visit and study worker-owned cooperatives in Cuba. Now, this one, the Alamar cooperative, is an agricultural cooperative that provides, here they're providing lunch for their worker members. It's an agricultural cooperative, and so has been in existence for some time, because there were laws enabling the formation of worker-owned cooperatives in the agricultural sector. But that was the only sector that in which this could happen until 2015, when a new law was passed, and which enabled the creation of worker-owned cooperatives in non-agricultural areas, such as hairdressers, restaurants, the hotel industry, and before these were all state-owned, and part of the economic reforms that were started under Raúl Castro, these reforms were taking place because there was the economy needed to mobilize the economy, and there was a recognition that there was no political reason or economic reason why the state should own a hairdressing shop or why the state should own a small restaurant. So many of these were converted into worker-owned cooperatives, and people were telling their stories about how for them it was much easier, I think, than setting up a worker-owned cooperative in the U.S., because there are the laws that were created to specifically support these kinds of enterprises. And then small shops like these are the types that would be the types of candidates for worker-owned cooperatives. So that is something, again, that has only been possible recently, and it was sort of a surprise to me when I first learned about that, because I thought, well, if you have a socialist economy, one type of organization in a socialist economy is a worker-owned cooperative, but that's not so. And it's not. I mean, for example, in China still does not have laws for worker-owned cooperatives in the non-agricultural sector. I mean, there still are a few communes that have opted to remain communes in the agricultural sector, but not, this does not exist in the outside of agriculture. Now, we have a lot of data on the MONDRAGON cooperatives, which are up there in Arasate, or MONDRAGON. So Arasate is the Basque name, and MONDRAGON is the Spanish name. And that red area at the top is the Basque country, and the town where the MONDRAGON cooperatives are headquartered is this beautiful setting with a beautiful rolling countryside. And this is kind of what a glimpse of what the small city looks like. And the MONDRAGON cooperatives are an important model because they comprise the largest industrial. It's more than industrial, but it was started as an industrial cooperative that today employs something like 120,000 worker members, and its founding is related to Father Jose Maria Arizmendi Arrieta, and that's why so many cooperatives are named Arizmendi after his vision for worker-owned cooperatives. The first co-op was created in 1956, and it was followed 3 years later by a cooperative bank, Caja Laboral, and at that time, Spain did not have a framework that was supportive of the creation of worker-owned co-ops, and so the MONDRAGON group, founded a bank that was both cooperatively owned as well as supportive of the cooperatives that the group intended to set up. And also in 1959 was set up the Lagunaro, which is a social welfare system within the co-ops that was on top of what the Spanish government was offering in terms of social security. And today the Spanish social security system has expanded since then, but still there's this additional layer that members of the MONDRAGON cooperatives benefit from. And then the research centers, educational centers, culminating in in the MONDRAGON University have been built up around the MONDRAGON cooperative. So these are some of the basic principles: open admission, neutrality, democratic organization, sovereignty of labor, subordination of capital. In other words, capital does not determine the decision making, it's labor, the interest of labor. Participatory management, wage solidarity, intercooperation among the cooperatives so they support each other. Social transformation, so that this is about its connection, and both internally social transformation as well as externally, how we can benefit the surrounding society, both materially as well as social transformation. Universality, about creating a system that is cooperative and universal, and then the educational pillar. So it's basically the concept is an inversion of the power dynamic, where instead of capital being the power and then labor being subordinate to capital, the idea is that we create this for the benefit of labor, and then capital serves the interests of labor. So capital is subordinate and in cooperatives. The governing structure in a large industrial cooperative is, obviously it's more complicated than in a simple cooperative affinity group, and so there is some hierarchy within the cooperative, but it is greatly minimized. So the number of layers from the worker who does not have any direct reports to the general manager of a MONDRAGON cooperative is 4 layers, and as opposed to 10 or 15 layers in a private corporation. Let's just suffice to say this is a bit complicated, but each of the MONDRAGON cooperatives makes contributions from its operating profits to an education fund, an investment fund, which is to go towards future capital investments in that cooperative, a solidarity fund to support other cooperatives in case they run into trouble, which has happened, a reserve, and then also a return of a certain percentage of the profits to the worker members. There's innovation. There's at this time, back in 2014, there were over 700 patents, and this is possible through some of the research centers and also the research that's done within some of the major industrial cooperatives. Once again, about how power flows in conventional corporations from top down and from in terms of values and conviction from the bottom up in a worker-owned cooperative. Now, the one thing that I found that was a notable question mark for me was that in the MONDRAGON cooperatives there is no place for labor unions, and even in places like Cuba, you have a socialist society, but there are still labor unions, and I still believe personally that labor unions, regardless of the organization, regardless of the relations of production, that labor unions as independent entities serve an essential role in oversight. There's no substitute for independent oversight. And that is what I consider to be a major deficiency of the MONDRAGON cooperatives. A quick glimpse of what one of the industrial cooperatives looks like. You see engineering. Here, these are engineers designing designing some of the products in the Fagor Arasate stamping co-op. These are some of the kinds of very large and modern computerized industrial machinery in the factory. As you can see, there's some very large pieces of equipment and stamping machine. You see that tall green thing in the background is a very large hydraulic stamping machine. Now there is a MONDRAGON cooperatives. Now this is a combined cooperative where you have worker members and consumer members. Now they all have one vote, and they form a governing council of 6 consumer members and 6 worker members, and it's quite considerable. It has branches throughout Spain, and this is what it looks like. It looks like a target, basically, in terms of diversity and scale. And this is a worker member, relating her experience as a worker member in the MONDRAGON cooperatives. The group has branches in mostly sales offices, but also procurement offices. Not so much production centers. There are a few production centers, manufacturing subsidiaries around the world. But the interesting thing is that because the laws in the other countries may or may not enable the creation of worker-owned cooperatives, most of these international branches, offices, or production centers are not themselves worker-owned cooperatives. They are just conventionally organized along basically capitalist lines. So it's sort of a hybrid. The credit cooperative, same thing. It's a combined membership of worker members and consumer cooperative, members, people who use the bank as members, they have votes on the council. It's a 21 billion euros, so it's quite a large enterprise. The Social Security Fund, Lagunaro, again, it's a supplement to the Spanish National Social Security System and health insurance. This is their office. Training centers, many of them that have been established, such as the engineering, business, but also humanities and executive education, and this culinary center in the Basque region. And then this is about the setting up of new cooperatives. Not all of these are members of the MONDRAGON cooperatives, but this is sort of the solidarity of helping the cooperative movement in general in Spain, and in particular in the Basque Country. And this is one major enterprise that went bankrupt back in 2013. So what we see here is that this is unemployment. So the lowest unemployment is in the Basque Country, and there's no doubt that this is a cause and effect correlation between the strength of the cooperative movement in the Basque Country and the lower unemployment, the better condition of labor in the Basque Country. Finally, I want to tell you a little bit about my experience in India. And cooperative societies in India, as you can see, are like anywhere else, are not equally distributed. The state that by far has the strongest cooperative movement is in the western state of Maharashtra, which has, I mean, this is so this is current, and so over 160,000 cooperatives. Again, this includes all types, not just worker-owned cooperatives. So the majority, again, are producer cooperatives and consumer cooperatives. So anyway, my specific experience is in that state, and so this is a small retail cooperative society, and you know, they're having a governing board meeting here, and it is a cooperative that sells edible oils, cooking oils. But there also are cooperatives on a very large scale, such as these sugar factories. So the cooperative sugar movement, and I say movement because it is the product of a political struggle that now comes to dominate the rural politics of the state of Maharashtra. And so this is a sugar factory, one of many that I visited and studied, called Walwa Sahkari Sakar Karkhana. What that means, Walwa is the name, Sahkari means cooperative, Sakar is sugar, and Karkhana is factory. So Walwa cooperative sugar factory in the southwestern part of the state. And it has other components to it. Pardon? So it has a country liquor.
Sorry. I'm unmuted.
It has a country liquor plant that you know produces country liquor from the molasses. It has a chemical distillery that produces acetone, alcohol, and a few other byproducts from molasses, and these are the actual members of the cooperative. So this cooperative is a producer cooperative, and I mean I studied it because I was interested in you know how the producer cooperative works, but also the condition of the workers. And as we'll see, there are two distinct kinds of workers here, and both of them suffer, you know, different degrees of exploitation. But these are the farmer members who are the producers, who are the statutory owners of this factory, and they are coming to these payment windows. So after their sugarcane is delivered to the factory, they come to the payment windows to collect their money for the sugarcane that they have supplied to the factory. And these workers here are the sugarcane cutters. So these are not employees. They are paid on a piece basis by the factory. They go and they have these bullock carts. They drive their bullock carts to the farmer's field. They cut the sugarcane, and then they load it on the cart, bring it back to the factory, and dump it into this conveyor. And you know, they go through a weigh bridge, so they're paid by the weight of the cane that they bring in. The workers in the factory, this is a worker who's weighing a bag of sugar which weighs 100 kilograms, and you know, he's just topping it off. These are chemists who monitor the machinery. This is a crystallization tank, and workers who operate the centrifuges, and you can see that the dress tells you something about their status in the factory. You're a chemist in the quality control lab. These are in the country liquor plant. These are the used bottles. The bottles of country liquor come here. They're washed, and then they're put onto the filling line, and then the bags of sugar. You see three different types of people here. It's very distinctive. You can tell by their dress. The coolies, who are perhaps the lowest levels of workers in the factory, and they do the manual labor of probably the hardest manual labor, which is loading a 100 kilogram bag of sugar on each man's back. That man runs it to the truck and throws it onto the back of the truck. And you see a manager here who's making a note of the bags that have been loaded onto a trucker's truck. This guy in the white is a trader, and then the trader is basically buying that sugar that he takes to market. So what have we here? So before I explain what's happening in the sugar factory, let's sort of review the class relations and the relations of production in the main kinds of enterprises that we're concerned with here. So the first one on the left is a traditional capitalist enterprise, where the poorer classes are the capitalist owners who own the capital, and the workers who sell their labor power. Now, as some of you know, I have this scheme or concept where I consider managers and knowledge workers to be intermediate classes, certainly intermediate strata. The managers have some control because they have some level of decision-making authority, and that makes them qualitatively different from the workers below them who have no such decision-making authority to allocate resources or determine a worker's salary. And then the knowledge workers, such as the chemists that you saw in those photos, whose work is not, whose labor power is not merely additive, but is multiplicative, because the results of their work are multiplied through the labor process of the workers in the creation of surplus value. Okay, so that's a traditional capitalist schema. In contrast, an SOE or a state-owned enterprise is what I consider to be particularly in a capitalist context, is a decapitated capitalist relation of production. Okay, and that means that there are no owners who own the capital, because that capital is owned by the state in the name of the people of the country. But the rest of the management structure, the rest of the relation of production is preserved from the managers, the knowledge workers, and then the proletariat on the bottom. Now, in an affinity group, worker-owned cooperative, where all the worker members are equal, it's a single dot. It's basically a classless structure. Now, in a worker-owned cooperative such as the MONDRAGON factories, which are on a larger scale and have layers of management, there is a manager worker relationship, okay, which is the vertical, defined by that vertical line. But then there's this measure of control and authority that is derived from the worker members, and that feeds back into what the managers can do. And so that's why you have that sort of loop. So I'm attempting to, this is all a works in progress, but I'm attempting to develop these schema to sort of diagrammatically represent the relations of production. Now, in a publicly traded corporation, it's really the board of directors who have control, even though the shareholders are theoretically the statutory owners. In practice, the board of directors more or less controls the shareholders, and so you have this sort of so there is this element of authority by the shareholders, but it really flows in the other direction. So this is an attempt to diagrammatize a publicly traded corporation. In the case of Walwa Cooperative Sugar Factory, which is a producer cooperative, we have on the left the class structure, the relations of production of the factory itself. That's the vertical line. Managers, knowledge workers, workers. The owners, statutory owners, are the farmer members who have a vote in the General Assembly and theoretically control the managers. Certainly, they have control over, you know, the payments, the amount that farmers will be paid for their produce, the terms of that exchange. In addition to that, these farmer members, well, they independently for other crops. In other words, if a farmer member grows sugarcane and also grows, let us say, a food grain or some vegetables like chickpeas or I don't know the English word, bajra and jawar. These are food grains that are grown in that region. These farmers can either, if they're very small, they can harvest themselves. If they're larger, they can hire other agricultural labor. So there's another relation of production involving the farmers themselves. Some of these farmers, when there's no harvest, they may actually go out and seek work as agricultural laborers or workers working for someone else. Meanwhile, there's another class, which are the migrant sugarcane cutters, who work for the factory but are not employees. And they, as I said, they are paid by the piece rate. They're migrant. They live in these huts that they have to move around, and so they are the most exploited in this whole system. And their production relationship is with the factory, even though they're out there harvesting the crop of the farmer. So that's why this diagram. And then, of course, the cooperative sugar movement was enabled by the political mobilization of the farmer class in Maharashtra, led by these politicians. So there is a Dada, a sort of father figure, who many of whom are elected members of the legislature, of the state legislature, or the national parliament. Some of them have been chief ministers, and they are sort of provide the political framework within which these things run. But anyway, that's my current attempt to diagram the relations of production, the sugar factory. And so I hope that gives a glimpse of cooperative economics, or I should really say political economy, cooperative political economy, that will form a fertile basis for further discussion. So thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Sorry if I was disconnected for a while. Thank you, Sharat. So we're going to take a break here, then come back to the discussion session. So I would go to Jean for announcements of upcoming program, followed by Richard Fallenbaum, appeal for money that you need. So Jean, go ahead.
Okay. Am I on? I hope so.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Next week I'll be on. It'll be November 2nd, November 7th, which, as we all know, is the anniversary of 105th anniversary of the October Revolution. And what I'm going to be talking about is socialism in the belly of the beast. You'll recall back in 1967 when millions of Americans were in the streets protesting the war in Vietnam. Che Guevara told us, "I envy you, North Americans. Yours is the most important struggle of all. You live in the belly of the beast." And what would Che tell us now when we have a much different situation? And then the following week, November 14th, we'll have Bruce Cagnon back again, speaking on impacts from the privatization of space, environmental conflicts over celestial claims, and more, which should also be very interesting. So we have some good talks coming up, and we always appreciate people who make suggestions and organize some of these forums for us, so that if you're planning to do this, please let us know, either myself or Raj or any other member of the committee. Thank you. Oh, don't forget, we're going to fall back next week. Daylight saving time ends. So.
Okay, thank you, Jean. So Richard, do you want to make an appeal now?
Well, just a brief appeal, and I'm sure many of you have heard it before. We continue to need funds to finance partly our work as Institute for the Critical Study of Society, and also to support the Nebel Proctor Library in Oakland, California. I've posted some information on the chat about how to contribute, and I'd strongly urge you to do it. That same information is on the email you received, and it's also on the website. So even a small contribution, especially a regular monthly contribution, would be very much appreciated. And we'll be able to continue our work, which is important. Thank you.
Okay, and I may say that many of you might find it convenient, as I do, to set it up with the bank. So I don't even have to worry. It just sends a check to Richard every month, whatever amount you decide you can afford. Okay, with that, I'm asking people to raise hands. I see one hand, but just so that you know, you go to the reaction button at the bottom if you don't know, and there you get the option of many things, including raising hands. And then once you raise hand, then I'll be able to see it, and I will go sequentially to you. Each of the person who makes a comment from the audience gets 2 minutes. And I don't like to interrupt you at the end of 2 minutes, so please try to police your time. And if you're running a few seconds over, it's fine. So with that said, Arzang is first. Then I have Yusuf, followed by Thomas Brom. So those are the three people. Then Jean. So these are the four hands, and followed by Richard W. So with that sequence, please go, Arzang.
Yes, hi. You guys hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Sharat, thank you. Thank you. This is a very, very good presentation. I'm amazed, and I'd like to thank you for that. My comment, or the question I have, which includes comment to you and everybody, especially in this meeting, Zoom meeting. My question is to larger audience as an intellectual left, radicals or progressive, especially socialists. Mike, I have asked this question also from Iranian community leftists because they've been outside. I'm sorry. Hello? Am I losing you guys?
No, I hear you. We hear you.
Okay. I have also asked that community of Iranian too, because they've been outside of the Iran for 40 years and they talk about socialism, all of the good stuff, which I agree. I happen to be one of them too. My question directly to them and to the larger audience, which is this audience as well, is this. If there are so many, you know, at what point we think we can come, some sound is getting interrupted here. You guys can hear that too?
Yes, we can hear it. It's coming on Arshang's site, at least that's what.
But I get some echoes from somewhere else. Anyway, so the question is this. Why is it that we are talking about ideal society of socialism, justice, equality, and all that, but nobody seems to be willing to participate and make that possible today, even at the belly of the beast? We know, as you just said, Sharat, there are so many good examples exist. So why is it that all the people who consider themselves left and radical are not economically participating in this co-op and creating business opportunities? Because when I look around myself, every one of these people that I know that they belong to left, they are, instead of creating co-op company, they are working for big corporation because they want to make more money. I simply don't understand this. Why, again, to everyone in this audience, and you know, we are not actively working in our community, doing small businesses. As Sharat showed, it is possible. It happens in this country. It happens in so many places. What, isn't it true that maybe socialism is not the answer? Maybe it's hard, and you know, it's just good on the paper. Because if it was, many of us should have participated actively, you know, in our daily life, creating businesses. See, there are in capitalism system, these people who believe in it, they have a vision, they get together, they make a company, they have a product, they release it, bingo, done. Why among socialists that's not the case? That's all, that's a comment, but if I get a chance, I'd like to talk more.
Yes,
Sharat, you want to take one at a time?
Yeah, I'll take the question right now.
Okay.
So
Okay.
thank you,
Go ahead.
Arjang, for that. It's a very good question, and so first of all, I want to reemphasize that that the benefit of worker-owned cooperatives is that this is something that we can do now, that people are doing right now within a capitalist society. And we don't have to wait for a revolution to at least create a cooperative economy, even if it's something that's small. The point is that this can be done on the side, and it can make a small difference. And then, you know, if it grows, if we have more and more cooperatives, we can make it a larger, a progressively larger sector of the total economy. Now, the question of why more people who are activists or leftists don't create cooperatives. Well, first of all, not everyone is you know, maybe interested in creating an enterprise. So like in my own case, I mean, I've never really thought about creating my own enterprise. I'm more of an academic, so you know, it's not in my area to create an enterprise. But certainly, if a person is in a sector where you want to, I mean, we have one of the members of Human Agenda, Richard Hobbs he's an immigration attorney, so he's already in the private sector, and he's expressed the intent, and actually they started the process, and there were some legal difficulties, but they started the process to convert the law office into a worker-owned cooperative. So all the members, all the people who work in that office would become cooperative members of that law office. So first of all, there has to be an intent to create or to convert. Okay, so there are two ways to go: is to take an existing enterprise and convert it into a worker-owned cooperative, and the other way is that if you have an interest, an inclination to create a new business, to create it as a worker-owned cooperative, and that will make a contribution towards creating a non-capitalist economy.
Okay. So, Thomas, you're
Yes.
next.
Okay, thank you, and thanks, Sharat, for your presentation and for your optimism. I have to say I'm amazed, given your background and the background of many of us on this call, that you failed to mention the Berkeley Co-op. The Consumer Co-op of Berkeley began in 1939. It grew over the years to include 12 stores. I'm sure you know this history: a pharmacy, Twin Pine Savings and Loan, a wilderness store. And in 1988, it collapsed in a heap. And not to say that the ARC didn't have a lot of positives, but it also, during that span, embraced all the contradictions. It had a unionized labor force it could not deal with. It had a fractious board. It expanded very quickly to 12 stores and it couldn't handle it. And most important, it was confronted with the giant competitors, Lucky and Safeway. It could not escape the capitalist relations of production with its labor force, or the exchange relations with its competitors. No surprise, it was embedded in the larger capitalist economy. So I'm not saying that building co-ops isn't useful. I was involved in doing it for 15 years in the 70s. The co-op project tried to make socialism in one city. It's just that you have to be, I think, aware of all of the contradictions that you're facing, and modest in your aspirations before the revolution.
Well, thank you for that. No, that's I mean, that is a very important piece of cooperative history locally. And I as a student, I used to go to the co-op.
Yeah.
So I remember it. Yeah, and but again, it as you say, it reflects the challenges of operating a mode of production that is at odds with the dominant mode of production and its social legal context, and so it's an uphill struggle for worker-owned cooperatives in this capitalist context. I mean, one that barely acknowledges that worker-owned cooperatives should even exist.
Right.
So yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sharat. Next one in line is Yusuf, who would be followed by Jean, and then Richard and W, and then Richard Fallenbaum, followed by Norma. So that's the sequence. Please go ahead, Yusuf.
Thank you. I mean, it's very appealing. And I have no problem with a more democratic workplace, more input from workers in decision making, cooperative barbershops in Cuba, which is still an overall socialist economy. But when you base a whole economy on this, it doesn't solve the problems of the market. It doesn't solve that in certain regions where productivity is higher, the living standards and your earnings will be better. And in regions where productivity is lower, things won't be so good. For example, in the Soviet Union, Turkmenistan, and Siberia, among other places, were hardship regions, and the central government artificially made wages and salaries high there. In a decentralized economy, this wouldn't couldn't be put into effect. So could you address these concerns?
Well, yeah, I mean so in any kind of, I mean, these are concerns. These are you know, non-uniformities that I mean, private enterprises also face. You know, within a larger economy where efficiencies, labor costs, infrastructure costs are uneven, and so obviously, if to the extent that that countries can you know, demarketize the relations, certainly the relations of exchange, then you know, that would be one factor that might be able to mitigate these kinds of structural inequalities. But for starting cooperatives, of course, the small cooperatives, they primarily are operating locally. I mean, if we take, for example, the bakeries, the pizzerias, that they're operating within the local economy, and so what they are competing against what's important is that they're competing against private enterprises within the local economy, and so they face the same challenges. The question is that in the United States they have not had equal access to financing. They have not had the institutional support that private enterprises have had, and this has been something that they've had to struggle against. Obviously, larger enterprises like the MONDRAGON factories that sell worldwide, they've been able to navigate that, so I think that if there's no fundamental reason why private enterprises that can navigate the global economic landscape, that cooperative enterprises cannot do the same, but they have to achieve similar economies of scale.
Well, I was more asking the cooperative economy versus a central socialist economy.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of a centrally planned socialist economy, certainly there is potential for economies of scale, because the state, for them, I mean, the real advantage in state enterprises is where there's a large capital cost for entry. So I mean, there are certain sectors where it's really logical for the state to make investments. So I mean, for example, electricity distribution, because it's something that you have to create a national grid. You need capital to do that, and it's also a natural monopoly, and so in many senses it's ideal for a national a state-owned enterprise to become the grid operator, let's say, that's not the ideal sector for cooperative enterprises. So I would envision a socialist society as one which consists of a mix of state-owned enterprises and cooperative, worker-owned cooperatives, and then, depending upon local circumstances, very, very small scale private enterprises. I mean, this is what's emerging in Cuba, is you have small privately owned enterprises of up to 20 employees in certain sectors, highly regulated. The worker-owned cooperatives, and then other, producer cooperatives, and then the state-owned enterprises, and then of course also a certain amount of regulation of prices.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, am I up?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Sharat. As always, I really enjoy your talk and benefit from it. And it's such a pleasure to have someone so well organized and put all these personal experiences you have. But what I'd like to do is, as an anthropologist, add an anthropological perspective, because this capability we have to cooperate goes back to the original cooperative society, which existed for millions of years before the rise of the state and class oppression. And some people call these primitive communists, but I insist that they should be called ancestral communism, because they were anything but primitive. The recent anthropological research, I mean, Lewis Henry Morgan studied them and said the basis of this was the law of hospitality, that you had an obligation to share food with other people. And this is absolutely fundamental to that society. And anthropologists who have studied these people show the same thing, that they were the original affluent society in that they were capable of meeting their needs, which were fairly minimal, but they could meet them with 4 or 5 hours of work per day, basically a couple of hours, 20 hours per week. And the rest of the time they spent in various culture building activities, music, art, and other things. So I just wanted to bring this out and point out that our ability to form these cooperative relationships is a very fundamental human trait. And at the basis of it is this felt obligation to basically share food, I think. And so I just wanted to say that. And again, thank you for your comments to see how this manifests itself in contemporary society.
Yeah, so thank you for that comment. I mean, I think that this is an underlying factor in what I mentioned at the beginning about these cooperative bubbles, is that there is a natural tendency, a natural desire to cooperate, but it does require at some point an agreement on the operating principles of that cooperative bubble.
Mhm. And David Graeber, the anarchist anthropologist, has some comments on this in, I forget, Debt. He's very good comments, but thank you again.
Okay, I think Richard W. is next. Richard W., followed by Richard Fallenbaum, followed by Norma, then Laura Wells and Mr. Beekman, B. Beekman. Okay, so go ahead, Richard W.
So I wanted to thank you for your presentation. I think you bit off a lot more than you probably wanted to. I had a couple of comments and observations. One was where in your schema of worker cooperatives, where would a musical band fit in? And the reason I ask is because there's a lot of bands out there. There are 4 or 5 people bands, 10 people bands. Basically, the definition of a small worker co-op, and I suspect that they're probably not included in your categorization. And I'm just kind of wondering how you would include those. And it's probably somewhat true also for theatrical groups, small theatrical groups. Also, you mentioned that you sort of disparaged a lack of a labor union in a worker cooperative, and I'm kind of wondering why. If you have a democratic participation in a worker cooperative, even when one as large as the MONDRAGON, and that's very large. I mean, that's international. Why you need a labor union? The other question I had, I guess, is a lot of questions. You bit off quite a. Oh, I wanted to also mention that you might give a look at Dollar and Cents magazine. They periodically do reviews of worker cooperatives. And one of the things that sticks in my mind, about 10 years ago, they reviewed why worker cooperatives, or why some worker cooperatives worked and some failed. And a lot of it had to do not with the politics of it, but the management, who they hired to manage these things. And one last question is, would you see the IWW as a worker cooperative of labor unions? Okay, I'll let you answer. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for those questions. So first about the artists or a band. Well, the reason, I mean, what we're looking at here when I show the figures. So these are the enterprises that are officially organized as worker-owned cooperatives, and the fact is that with artists, I mean, and it has to do with the way that, I mean, I've become an artist too, because I've been dancing and doing dance performances, and so I know that like, for example, I don't have any formal organization as an enterprise, because usually if I get paid for something, it's either cash or even if I get paid by an institution, it's less than $400, which is the tax reporting requirement. And so even though I give them a W-9 form, there hasn't been a need to officially organize. And if I had partners, which we do have dance partners, we can, there hasn't been a need to organize it officially as a cooperative, but it functions if there are multiple members of a troop, okay, they hopefully, if they're politically aware, they will make decisions collectively. But because of the way that they are paid, and a lot of it is just tips, they don't have a pressing need to officially organize as a cooperative. Okay, now I forgot the second. Just give me the keyword. What was this second thing you asked about?
Well, one thing I asked about was the IWW as a worker, a union cooperative. And the other thing I said was the dollars and cents. And I forget myself what the third, or if anyway.
Okay. I think we answer those two, Sharat, because we have many people waiting. Time is running short.
I mean, I'll look at the dollars and cents review, and as far as IWW, as I said, it could be. I don't know the specifics, but it's just like the U.S. Federation of Worker-Owned Cooperatives being a co-op of co-ops. So, I mean, whether it is technically a co-op of co-ops or not, I don't know. But potentially it could be.
Okay, Richard Fallenbaum, please.
Okay. Well, it seems to me, from a Marxist point of view, the character of an individual and an institution is determined by the society in which it's embedded. So, for instance, 1941 Mondragon was a fascist enterprise, and 2021 Mondragon is an imperialist enterprise. Despite whatever they think about themselves and however they organize themselves, and it's sort of their contradictions there, but the underlying character of the institution is determined. The utopian socialist Robert Owen was functioning in a capitalist. Actually, he was a capitalist himself, but anyway, I'm also interested in the Rojava movement, which gets a lot of currency now. I don't know whether it's exactly utopian socialist or cooperative, but it's functioning in northern Syria under the guidance of the U.S. imperialist warmongering fascist state. So would Kurdish socialism is really a form of fascism too. So anyway, and incidentally, for that reason, I believe it was Lenin who said, "Don't waste your time on cooperatives under capitalism. They just drain the workers' energy in maintaining these. When they could be fighting capitalism and preparing for a revolution."
Yeah. So
Good.
thank you for that. So yes, the relations of production and the nature of cooperatives, the nature of any enterprise, is dependent on the economic context. The context of the mode of production in that social formation. And I mean, a key example is state-owned enterprises in a capitalist society. So, for example, take a state-owned enterprise in India versus a state-owned enterprise in Cuba, right? So the purpose of the state-owned enterprise in India is to provide infrastructural support for capitalism, okay, for the Indian capitalists. That's what Nehru created the state sector for. It was because the private sector the Indian private sector did not at that time, at the time of independence, have the capability to invest in steel, to build power plants. Okay. And so this was the state sector provided that infrastructure. Whereas a state-owned enterprise in Cuba serves the whole society. The surpluses that are achieved, well, first of all, what those state enterprises do is provide things that are essential for the society, for consumers. And then its surplus value is plowed back in to provide services for the people of Cuba. So yeah, that's very important, the context. The other thing I guess I should say is that you brought to mind, a comment that I was intending to make but didn't, and that is about why the major socialist economies, never except for Yugoslavia, never really adopted worker-owned co-ops outside of agriculture, and in part this was because of the urgencies of the situations, the fact that China, Russia, had to sustain production under very adverse conditions, with the whole imperialist world, attacking their economies, boycotting their economies and trying to isolate them. And then there was the concept, that Stalin had of that and it's not necessarily a concept that I would, personally universalize, but his concept was that the ultimate form of socialism is not an enterprise that is owned by the workers in that enterprise, but rather by the entire society. And so it was under that conceptualization that state-owned enterprises, became, the way to organize production in the Soviet Union. And then after that, all the other countries that followed that model tended to go with state-owned enterprises.
Norma, please, you're next, please. Norma, your microphone is off. What is still off? Still off.
I was sitting and waiting for a while and thinking I was ready. And anyway, the name of the state in northern Syria is Rojava. So you could be comforted by that. People who know have said it. And I've listened to a number of them. Strike Debt was reading a book that came up with the concept that the idea of equilibrium in economics doesn't stand up to empirical observation. So this whole idea that there's, and we had made a statement among us a long time ago that economics is not a science. It's a figment of people's imagination. Giving up the concept of certainty is one of the themes of this book we were reading together. The other thing is the idea of where cooperatives belong. First of all, the laws against cooperative behavior have resulted in us not living together and giving each other food and sharing lives together the way that Gene was referring to, and he has often done, and I appreciate tremendously. We've been separated to where we're living separately on these streets that lead into getting to, by public or private transportation, the robotic jobs in the offices or even teaching school. So I've commented in the chat, the reason to do cooperative for all production needs to be socialist control of production to a planned economy. eliminating profit within a structure wherein people all provide among their communities products they like or want or need. Products they, let's see, work needs to become what people desire to do and to have done. All people able, regardless of age, physical, mental health, all their circumstance, are able to participate to produce within the structure. With your, if you're 3 years old or 90 years old, everybody has a value relative to production in society, which is, means not an 8-hour day, no more 8-hour day. And that there's no longer a for-profit activity. And I just wanted to comment about the noise that comes in. That noise, apparently, from what I've seen going on the screen, is we are being trolled so that the troll is able to get in by any open line that we have. So I and often Raj and so forth are they're able to get in through our line when it's open. They're just trolling whenever it's open. It'll come in.
Thank you for that. I think Laura?
I have a couple of questions.
Oh, no, yes. Sorry, I was muted. Okay.
Okay. And one of them is just, I'm curious just personally how you became interested in co-ops. You've studied so many different types, from Burning Man to MONDRAGON to other countries. And I was just curious about the background to that. And the other thing is in Cuba, what about the agricultural, like state-owned agriculture as opposed to, are they also moving a little bit more toward more private enterprise in the agricultural sphere? So those are my two questions.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Well, so how I got involved in this is, I mean, so some of it is you know, by accident. I mean, I was not in Tahrir Square to study cooperation. I was there to study an uprising, and also in some sense support it, passively support it, as far as you know, more recently, of course, as a member of, well, even before I was a member of Human Agenda, I went on some of their emulation tours. I went on the tour to MONDRAGON, and then I went on their tour to the cooperatives in Cuba. So that's how I got involved there. The sugar factories in India. The purpose of that study was not, again, about cooperatives, although I was interested. I thought it was more interesting to study the cooperative as a method of economic organization than to study a sugar factory in Uttar Pradesh. So you know, which is because in North India, the sugar industry is totally private. I mean, it was interesting because of a lot of things, because it ties into the entire question of political power, rural political power in the second most populous state in India. So that's how I got involved. Okay, now, okay, your second question, just a keyword.
Agriculture in state-owned and
State-owned, yes. So the one has to look at how, you know, agriculture was organized or reorganized after the revolution, and so there were different kinds of, this organization came about from the former ownership, which was that there were these large plantations that were owned by the multinational corporations, right? So there were American sugar companies owned the big sugar plantations. So when those sugar companies were forced out, this land came into the hands of the state. Okay, and so these became, for the most part, they became state farms, and some of these lands were like citrus orchards, just thousands and thousands of acres, and it was easy to transition these kinds of plantations into state farms. Okay, whereas the farmland that was owned by Cuban farmers, it was easier to handle that by collectivization. So this has to do with just the structure of what Cuba inherited from the pre-revolutionary situation. And it turns out that the fertility of the land was also different. So the fertility of the land that was owned by these small farmers was higher. Was a lot of it was on the coast. They were fed by rainfall, and it was more fertile land, and so we can see today that the cooperatives, and some of them are still reflecting that in which those farmers still own the land. They're not collectivized, but those farmers are organized into producer cooperatives. Okay, so we have both worker-owned cooperatives as well as producer cooperatives in the agricultural sector. The plantations, on the other hand, are as a whole less fertile lands, less productive, and so the reason that there is thought being given to converting state farms into some other form of organization is because of the low productivity. But that has more to do not so much with the mode of production as with the type of land that the state farms tend to occupy. Well, I think that Raj, I think we've run out of time. But
Yes, we have run out of time. Yes, thank you, Sharat. Go on, but the recording normally stops at this point. But I'm on a screen that doesn't allow me to go there. Oh, B. Beekman has not asked the question.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
Where?
I'm sorry for
Hi, thank
having skipped you somehow. I apologize.
That's okay. I will be very quick. Thanks a lot. I just wanted to offer you quickly mention Motorola, how their corporation patterns can work. And I know in Berkeley, they just had a big meeting about the future of their emergency services program with Motorola. And it gave me the idea, they were a bit kind of closed about the subject. It gave me the idea that there is ways to work towards the future of emergency services and its data collection that can prescribe to and work towards like the good sanctuary city ideas of Berkeley. And that we are at a time to further the concepts of better aggregate data collection that respect sanctuary city ideals and civil rights and civil protection ideals. And this comes from, there's a whole new field growing about community oversight with the future of technology and the good civil rights and civil protection practices there can be with surveillance technology. And I was interested how you mentioned MONDRAGON needs a bit possibly of more oversight within their program. And I wanted to mention the good oversight ideas that are growing for the future of community technology, and that it can be a community effort the public can get involved with to ask their government, let's make some changes, let's work more together and communicate what is good practices for our future. We're not totally, locked out of our technology future. We have ways to address our government, and these oversight ideas are really cool. And I wanted to mention it. Hopefully it can be of use with your co-op ideas that you seem to be working on. And I just wanted to quickly mention it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Blair. So anyway, appreciate the comment. This does trigger my memory about Richard's other question, which was about labor unions in worker-owned cooperatives. And I will say this, that if in practice the MONDRAGON cooperatives. I mean, there is worker control, but this is in practice. There's still something to be left to be desired. I mean, this is what I'm told by some former workers who left the MONDRAGON cooperatives. So even though it's a better form of organization than anything that is private, it's not ideal. And so as long as it is not ideal, as long as we are human beings, there is a role for oversight. And that's why I believe, anyway, that labor unions do have a role, even in worker-owned cooperatives. They have a role in a social society, and that's one thing that at least the in Cuba is recognized, that even though the organization of society is socialist, the most of the enterprises are either cooperative or state-owned, still there is a role for labor unions, because there's no other, the governance will always have mistakes, and the only sure check on it is independent oversight. Thank you.
Yeah, Sharat, I have a question for you, which is, you know that in India, one of the most successful cooperative is the dairy cooperative called Amul. So you familiar with that? And why is that so successful in India, whereas is it to do with this government of India's policy, or is it to do with the fact that there was no monopoly industry, capitalist industry in that area, so why it is successful? Can you give me your insight into Amul's success?
Well, I don't have a specific experience or knowledge about how Amul developed into this. I mean, it's a so Amul is a dairy. We see especially like butter,
Cheese,
ghee, cheese,
yeah, cheese and all
and
milk, yeah.
Amul products are distributed nationally. So wherever you go, it's probably the most recognizable national brand in terms of dairy products.
I buy them here. They go overseas. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, now a lot of India is exporting because of the expatriate community. It's exporting a lot of its food products around, everywhere, not just the Middle East, U.S., Britain, but it was successful, and as you say, there was. There was no competition from the private sector. There was no comparable, private sector company to sort of push them out. So, but I'm sure that if one looks into it, one will find certain specific factors that led to its at least its financial success, its expansion, and then once it's established, as a national brand, then there is something about this brand recognition that people keep on buying that brand if they think that it represents a reliable quality.
Yeah.
That's all.
I think in general, one more thing. What Richard Fallenbaum pointed out is true, that within the structure of socialism, cooperation is possible, as I quoted Lenin, that it is possible to build cooperative producers and distributors from among the mostly peasantry. And that was done. I mean, that's what was carried on by Stalin in collectivization and so forth. But it is very difficult to fight against an existing capitalist superstructure above for cooperatives to survive, as your Berkeley experience of showed. And so therefore, I see this as a attempt to bypass the struggle against, which seems very difficult against capitalism, because capitalism is so huge, humongous in the United States. So I think this is kind of where people are. How do you view this? This is obviously a growing phenomena, so there is a need for it. Yet it is incapable of overthrowing capitalism, as Richard and somebody else has pointed out. So how do you?
Yes, so thank you for that question. So I don't consider it to be a bypassing or a short circuiting of the effort to have a revolution to overthrow capitalism. Instead, I see it as creating a material base, so worker members constitute a social material base that is supportive of non-capitalist relations of production. And so it contributes to the base of people who want a revolution, who want to overthrow capitalist relations of production. But and then too, I mean, the other aspect is what is our outlook for a socialist revolution? It's so far off, at least in this country. I think also in Western Europe, that if we want to create some measure of workers' rights, equity for workers in our lifetime, the way to do it is through worker-owned cooperatives.
There's a whole bunch of laws in this country that undercut cooperative efforts, communal efforts. And the time you get to know them is when you start trying to do anything that works, have 5 people own a piece of property, for example. Very complicated to get around that. And that's been recently done around in Berkeley by some very, not extractive, but a person who was really looking for making profit and has facilitated it by creating loans that will serve such an activity in a reasonable manner other than tenants in common. The laws against us doing for ourselves. That's why we need a socialist revolution, is to surmount those laws.
Very true. Yes.
And by the way, those kinds of things can happen without huge majority activity, but that the thing that you were saying, and somebody else, some other people have said, is teaching people that we're here to do this kind of thing, and that so are they here to do that. You are a communist,
Okay, anybody else want to make a comment, or Sharat, you want to say final thing, or shall we end the program? What is everybody? So consensus. Okay, Richard W. wants to come back in. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, I think well, I don't disparage worker-owned cooperatives, but they're only a partial answer to the problems. They're not the answer to overthrowing capitalism. At best, what they do is they teach the participants in how to run a company. Overthrowing capitalism requires a whole lot more than that. So there's a lot of idealism here, I think, about looking toward the work of cooperatives as a mechanism, as a vanguard of the revolution, if you will. I don't see that happening.
The Soviet Union people begged for tutelage in how to run capitalist production after the revolutionary structures had gotten undermined and sold to private entities and so forth, stolen to private entities. There is a person named Sharon Tennyson who wrote a book on how much she was sought after, having made contact with people in the Soviet Union, ex-Soviet Union, who asked her, how do you run a capitalist setup? And she was arranging for tutoring of those people so that they could do those things. It's just terrible.
Yeah, well, there's lots of lessons to be learned. I mean, a part of them are in the Soviet Revolution. Don't forget that the Soviet was faced with the kulaks, who were rich peasant landowners who really didn't really want to collectivize their agriculture and stood up
Right.
to the Soviet Union.
Yeah. I have somebody who has not spoken. Can I give
Sure,
that person a chance?
Why don't you
Donald-
let him finish his thought for a moment? It just take another half a sentence.
My thoughts are finished. I'll defer.
Donna, please go ahead.
Yeah, just kind of like, for me, the opportunity of working in a cooperative owned company would be that on a small level, to bring it down, is that I probably have the opportunity of earning a living wage, and that I have some kind of power there to be treated in a dignified and respectful way. So if there are people who are treating me badly, then there's a forum that I can address that. Whereby in the current system, even being a member of a union, I basically have no power. So just on a smaller level, that's for here in the United States and this horrible system that we live in, working in a cooperative owned company, I just think that there's much better opportunities. And definitely it has nothing to do with overthrowing this horrible capitalist system, because cooperatives are not going to do that.
I agree with you. I agree that this is not the revolution. Yeah, but the only thing I would say is that the alternative to cooperatives, which is either capitalist enterprise or state-owned enterprise, we of course we all know what capitalist enterprises do, but even state-owned enterprises, I mean, are not the solution. Because they are hierarchical, and there is worker alienation in state-owned enterprises, even in countries that we think of as socialist, and so it's all part of the socialist transition, whether it is state-owned enterprises, workers' co-ops. This is part of I believe that these have a role in supporting ourselves, so in the interim before there is a socialist revolution, and they are part of the longer term transition to socialism.
If I live to be 120, I'll definitely see socialism worldwide. But anyway, who else wants to comment? Please go ahead.
So it sounds to me, Sharat, that one of your knocks is against hierarchy, and I think that hierarchy was going to exist within a worker cooperative. I mean, you mentioned that it may be flattened, but there's still a certain hierarchy in the MONDRAGON corporation, and it is a corporation regardless of the management and the politics of it. So but hierarchy is I don't see that it's going to be a necessary feature of what, 4 billion people. You're going to have some variety of hierarchy in managing that. So that can't be the sine qua non, if you will, of against corporations.
Gene wants to say something. Go ahead, Gene.
Oh, I just will note that nobody seems to have mentioned Marx's central concept in the transition from capitalism to communism, namely the dictatorship of the proletariat. This was absolutely essential in Marx's view, and it was because the first thing that the capitalists do when they realize that they might be overthrown is to organize a really horrible resistance, which we've seen in both the fascists in prior to the Soviet Revolution and Chiang Kai-shek and his crew. So I just wanted to, again, let's not forget about the dictatorship of the proletariat. That was Marx's central concept.
Okay. Is this the end of the program, or does anybody else have any comment, including, of course, Sharat? So Jean, you're done. So what should we do? Shall we end the program? It's 6 minutes remaining till 1 o'clock. I haven't been able to stop the recording, but Mehmet will take care of.
Maybe Sharat would like to say some final words.
Yeah. Sharat, do you have some final thoughts before we end the program?
Well, first, I want to thank the Institute for the Critical Study of Society for keeping this series alive. Thank you all for attending, and we have to. I don't know that I'm, particularly an optimist about transformation. I'm not saying that co-ops are the answer, but they're certainly better than what we have. They're certainly better than, and I think we have a responsibility to make work as good as possible for us and for the workers of the present, and that helps all of us focus on the larger, longer-term goal of transforming society, of revolutionary transformation. We have to take care of ourselves in that process. So once again, thank you all, and it's been a very enlightening discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharat. And with everybody's permission, I'll close the program today, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Okay, thank you, Sharat. Thank you for your monitoring this, Raj. Excellent job.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Nebo Proctor Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses. Since we can no longer pass the hat at our in-person forums, please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, @yahoo.com, and the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Nebo Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.